Hi everyone, welcome back to elearningbridge. I hope you guys are doing good and staying safe. So today's podcast is especially dedicated to all the aspiring data engineers, aspiring students and working professionals who want to make their career into this big data domain or as a data engineer. And for this podcast, I have a very special guest, Karolina. She is working as a data engineer in UK. So the entire agenda or theme of this podcast is basically to make you aware about the data engineering domain and how it works outside India. Like if you want to move from India and want to join different companies in different countries, then what kind of skill sets, qualification they would expect from you, what would be the interview process, what kind of tech framework, what kind of tech stack you should know in this data engineering domain, and how data engineer works outside India, what kind of role and responsibilities they will be getting in those companies, and many other topics, differences in this big data domain, different profiles, everything. So definitely this podcast will be really interesting because two data engineers will be facing each other, one from India, that is me, and one from United Kingdom. So watch this podcast till the end and also do share your thoughts, your opinion in the comment section. Like this video for the better reach, and if you're new to the channel, then don't forget to subscribe and press the notification icon. And thanks to Crio.Do for sponsoring this video. Crio.Do is a kind of platform which focuses on learning by doing, and they have created really amazing and extensive courses on very popular profiles like full stack developer and backend development. So if you are someone who want to enhance your skill set in the field of software development with latest tech stack and some real world projects, then I have shared one link in the description. Check that out and you will get some amazing free perks, including good coupon codes for heavy discount and along with that good scholarships. So don't forget to explore Crio.Do platform. Link is in the description. When you will click on that link, you will be landed on this home screen where you can see some important things will be provided to you free of cost, like the product-based company interviews, free guide for best resumes, and one coupon code will be unlocked which you can use to get the extra 10% off, including 30% scholarship. And also this will be applicable till 31st July, and using this promo code you can enroll yourself in their amazing programs which is actually dedicated towards the highly demanding profiles, full stack developer and the backend developer. You can see all the details here, like the duration of the programs, what kind of tech stack you will be learning, and the best thing is that you will be creating the projects which are actually the real world use cases and equivalent to those projects which you get a chance to work during your internships. So those practical projects will give you amazing learnings first of all, and second thing is that you can mention these projects in your profile which will help you to stand out from the crowd, and it will seek the attention of good product-based company recruiters. And they also have third amazing programs like fellowship program in software development, free trial available, and extensive hours of training during this program, assured scholarship after the trial if you are able to prove yourself, and very important, placement guarantee. So this kind of benefits you will be getting from this program. So now without any delay, let's quickly jump on to our podcast part. So thank you so much, Karolina, for joining this podcast, and I'm really happy that first time I'm going to have a discussion about data engineering with another data engineer. So two data engineers facing each other. So it is going to be a very informative conversation regarding the data stuff. And guys, also Karolina has her own channel where she talks about the data stuff. So I'll put her channel link in the description. Go and check that out, subscribe, and you will keep on getting good content regarding the data engineering. So Karolina, first can you give a short introduction about yourself to my audience and what's your background?
Sure. Thanks so much, 𝙤𝙤, for the introduction, for inviting me as well. It's a great pleasure to speak to you today. I'm Karolina. I'm from London, well, originally from Poland, but I live in London. Like you mentioned, I also have a YouTube channel which is mainly about data engineering, data science, but also about some other bits and pieces, like more sort of philosophical / artistic content. Sometimes I feel like doing that. I work as a technologist or a data person. That's what I prefer to call it, because I don't actually know whether I am a data engineer or not. I did have a couple of rotations or couple of times where I did work as a data engineer, and that's when also on my channel I would call myself a data engineer because that's what I was doing. But what I do changes very quickly, and I'm not sure if it actually falls under the typical definition of a data engineer. But yeah, I think that's all about me. So I heard you've got some questions for me today.
Yeah. So I have prepared some good questions for you, so that our audience can get to know more about how things actually work in the big data domain outside India. Because outside India, there are lots of companies, right, who are working in the big data domain. So I just wanted to cover these things, that outside India, how things actually work, like what all things we need and what all things we need to understand. So, Carolina, when and how did you start your career as a data engineer?
Right. So I was doing my master's degree, and during that, I started applying for various graduate schemes in London, technology graduate schemes. So my route to data engineering was quite unusual, I'd say, in a sense that I didn't go directly for junior data engineering positions, but I just applied for a very broad general technology grad scheme, and I just kind of ended up doing some data engineering work. So that's how I did that. But having said that, I am more or less aware of what kind of skills are needed to work as a data engineer in the UK, having worked as a data engineer and having worked with other data engineers. So so I know what kind of skills I would advise people to learn and how to apply, how to prepare your application to apply for such a job. But yeah, like I said, mine was very general, so not very typically data engineering one.
So, Carolina, as you talked about data engineering role in UK. So, in UK, when you apply in a company for a data engineer role, then how they actually hire people and what all things they expect from a candidate?
Right. I would say there are four main things, four main areas of knowledge, or four main skills that are required, that employers really look for. And I think the first thing is Python. I think these days Python is probably top language for data engineering and data science as well. The second thing, SQL, or probably even on par with Python. SQL is obviously the lingua franca of data. It's universal across many databases. It's extremely important to know it as a data engineer. The third thing I would say is probably Linux and understanding the command line a little bit, so that whenever you work with some sort of command line interface, or in Linux, or well, even in Hadoop, or whatever you're doing, something that is a bit more remote, then you will have to know how to access that server, access that cluster somewhere remotely, and for that you need Linux. And lastly, cloud. I think cloud is extremely important. It has an increasing importance here in the UK and probably elsewhere as well. So I would advise a junior candidate or a junior data engineer to gain at least some skills in the cloud. I know that it's probably impossible to become an expert without any kind of real work experience, as in you probably learn on the job, but having some sort of background and general kind of high-level overview and understanding of how things fit together, I think is quite important, and cloud is definitely a part of the picture. So these things, I think, and then on top of that, Git, understanding at least some basic Git commands is definitely very useful, and employers, I'm sure they look for it as well.
Cool. So I think you have covered most of the important things which actually these employers look for a candidate to become a good data engineer. So I think people, now you can understand what Carolina has talked about. Even I have covered these topics in my data engineering series, where I have talked about important skill sets to become a good data engineer, and I think me and Carolina are on the same page. Like, she also talked about the similar skill sets, so you can check that out. So, Carolina, do you think most of the aspiring engineers are clear about actual roles and responsibilities of a data engineer? Like, are we supposed to know data science and ML related stuff as well? Because this was the most frequent, or you can say most often asked question from my audience, or whosoever ping me on LinkedIn or any other social media platform, especially the freshers or entry level freshers. So they're really confused. I mean, they keep on asking whether I need to cover the mathematical aspects and all the typical concepts of data science and machine learning to become a good data engineer.
Yes, it's definitely a great question, and I know it's asked by many people who want to break into the field. To address the first point, as in, do people know what to learn, what to expect? I think increasingly yes, in a sense that I think data engineering was a little bit of a mystery about 2 or 3 years ago, but I think thanks to YouTube channels like yours or some good Medium content, and basically thanks to growing awareness of employers as well, I think data engineer is a bit more kind of clear to people. But still, people do ask these questions: do I have to know data science as well? Do I have to know mathematics? And I think the answer is, if you are intending to work in a large organization, I think you don't, because there is a clear division of labor, clear division of tasks and the responsibilities there. And if you're a data engineer, then you're a database person. Basically, you work on the pipelines, you work with data, you work with the kind of architecture side of things. And you typically don't touch any models, any mathematics, any data science models. However, I can imagine that if you work for a startup, for example, and you're a jack of all trades kind of person, it might differ, and perhaps there you are expected to be a bit more well-rounded. But I think it's not something I would worry about, and probably in the majority of cases, it's just about learning the computer science fundamentals rather than worrying about any kind of scientific aspect of the job. I think it's definitely a small kind of margin. So I would focus on learning how to code, learning how to work with.
You talked about the high level overview of important skill set, but if I ask you, based on your experience, then what all tech frameworks or what all important frameworks you want the aspiring data engineers to be good at?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, because it definitely depends on the organization that you end up working for. But I think the skills that I mentioned previously, just having some good foundations in Python, Linux, SQL, and in terms of frameworks, well, learning some cloud, if you can call it a framework, for example, AWS or Azure, I think one of the two would be a good start, especially AWS, because it has the highest market share of all cloud providers at the moment. So at least learning some basics of that would be useful. In terms of other frameworks like Hadoop or Spark, frankly speaking, I can see Hadoop being increasingly replaced by cloud technology. So I'm not sure if learning Hadoop is worthwhile. And in terms of Spark, I do see it on many job openings in the UK. Personally, I didn't have exposure to it, so it's quite hard for me to comment. So I would just focus on the 4 skills that I mentioned before.
Okay. Totally agree on that part. So you kept on emphasizing on cloud technologies, right? So means what we can say, basically, in some of the organizations, they might not be using the cloud stuff, or they are working on the on-premises stuff. So based on the market cap and everything, how important cloud technologies to become a good data engineer?
I think cloud technologies are very important these days, and I think it's hard to get away without knowing some basics. But like I mentioned before, I think it's also quite unrealistic to expect of a junior person or of someone who didn't have any real job experience to know cloud, because cloud is essentially is always synonymous with having a large, almost synonymous with having a large system, large organization. So if you are, let's say, just starting out and just learning some things on your own, then likely you won't have much exposure to the cloud and to like real data processing on the cloud. So it's unrealistic to expect that someone would know that. But having at least some basics and going through some basic courses on that online, I think that would help to set someone apart from other candidates and just set someone's foot in the door.
Cool. So, Karolina, I think this is also one of the often asked question, that do we need any kind of specialization course or master's degree to start our career in big data domain?
It's a good question. I think, to be honest, I think having a formal degree is useful and helpful in a sense that it is always a signal to employers that you are hardworking and that you can, you're productive, you can work under pressure, you're ambitious and all sorts of things, like you're intelligent, whatever. It's always a signal. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're hardworking and intelligent and ambitious, but having a degree shows that on your CV. And I think it is helpful to have that, because then employers can basically, filter your CV and just basically pay attention to you. In terms of knowledge itself and learning skills, I don't think having a formal education differs much from doing things on your own, doing things online. I think you can be more effective. You can probably learn more, learn better when you do it on your own, and also you pay much less for that, especially if education is expensive in your country. So I think the answer really is, if you are prepared to pay for the formal education, if you can afford that, if you have access to such education, then I would definitely go for that degree, because it's helpful, because it's useful. But if you don't have access to that, or maybe you had a degree in history and now you want to switch to data engineering, then I wouldn't worry, because first of all, there are conversion courses, and secondly, yes, you can learn on your own, and that's still very valid and appreciated, and your skills, at the end of the day, your skills matter more and your portfolio matters more. But I just don't want to completely discount formal education, because I know that it helps. So yeah, that's really the answer. You can learn on your own. Courses are useful. Online courses are useful. But if you can afford education, then go for education.
Cool.
Formal education.
So, Karolina, how would you compare software engineering profile with data engineering profile? This is also one of the good questions I kept on getting from the audience. That what is the actual difference between these two in terms of work, in terms of growth, challenges, and compensation?
I think, I got asked this question quite a lot as well. I think data engineers are a special case of software engineers. So basically, I see software engineering as this umbrella term, and then data engineering is just one type of software engineer. So it's quite hard to say. What falls under the umbrella of software engineering is, front-end engineering, app engineering, data engineering. There are various types of software engineers. And data engineers happen to be growing quite fast, as in this, the demand for data engineers happens to be growing quite fast now. So, for example, since last year, the number of interviews have grown for 40% for data engineers. Salaries stand at, according to Glassdoor, between $110,000 to $150,000 a year, which is a lot of money. And it's hard to say how it compares to other software engineers, because again, this answer is, the answer to this question is a bit more complicated. There are a lot of facets to this question. It will also depend obviously on the location. Even within one country, there are cities where you earn much more than in other cities. So let's say if you work in Silicon Valley, it cannot be compared to working in, a small city somewhere outside of somewhere in a small state, or if you work in London, you won't earn the same as working in the US, etc., etc. So these things definitely depend. That's one thing. And the second thing, the type of organization as well. So if you work for Google or Amazon, obviously you won't earn the same as working for a small software house. So it's a very complex. Well, the answer to this question is very complex, and I think in general it's worth looking at what you prefer doing, what you enjoy doing more, because I think it's quite misleading, or perhaps it's not the best approach to simply look at the salaries, because salaries change, the demand changes. I think looking at what you prefer doing is always the way to go. And again, like I said, data engineers are type of software engineers. So even if the demand for data engineers starts decreasing in the future for some reason, you already have those software engineering skills which you can apply to front-end development or other kind of development. So, being a software engineer, having multiple skills, you're always set for the future, and it actually doesn't matter whether you're a data engineer or a different kind of engineer.
So thank you very much, Karolina, for sharing your experience with my audience. I hope my audience can learn from your experience, and at least the main agenda was to cover things about working outside India for a data engineer role. So what all things Karolina has explained, I think it might help you if somebody is looking out for the opportunities in the UK or outside India. So these all things what she mentioned, it will definitely help you to start your career as a data engineer there. So I really like this entire conversation, Karolina, and being a data engineer, I can relate each and everything whatever you shared. So thank you very much for making this podcast really, really wonderful.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks so much.
So that was all about in this podcast, guys. I hope you would have enjoyed the conversation with Karolina and whatever experience she has shared about the data engineering and big data domain. And if you enjoyed this podcast, then don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends. If you're new to the channel, then make sure to subscribe and press the notification icon. I will see you guys in the next weekend with another amazing podcast. Till then, just stay safe, stay home, take care of yourself and your family too.